The man began to stare into Lu Sheng's eyes and with a worried expression, he promised him that as long as he had a way to escape the pursuit, he would do anything that Lu Sheng asked of him. While Lu Sheng was looking into his eyes, he remained silent for several seconds, then closed his eyes, pointed his finger towards the ceiling and with a smile asked the man to tell him the exact location of the secret gold mine. He took out his mobile phone and opened the map application. While Lu Sheng held onto the phone, the man approached him and indicated the location of the secret gold mine. Upon seeing this, Lu Sheng simply nodded. Then he moved the phone away from the man, closed his eyes, and with a smile explained to him that no one would chase him anymore. Upon hearing this, the man approached him and while looking at the phone screen, he became very anxious and worried because he didn't know what Lu Sheng had planned to do. He panicked and while looking into his eyes, asked why this matter had been resolved so quickly and also asked how he had achieved it. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng showed him the phone. While staring into his eyes, smiled and revealed to him that the reason was very simple. He explained that he had simply posted the location of the secret gold mine on the internet. Upon hearing this, the man was shocked and while looking at his mobile screen, he thought that this mine was a gold mine valued in millions. He began to wonder why Lu Sheng had posted the address on the internet as if it were nothing. At the same time, in the secret base, one of the men in charge of monitoring the signal of 9 rings lost connection and thought that this was not good. While he stared at the screen, he informed his boss that the network signal of 9 rings had been interrupted and he feared that something had gone wrong. He looked back and explained that they had overlooked something since, after all, the man possessed a letter revealing the secret of the gold mine, so now it wouldn't be too difficult to get some help. At that moment, everyone stood up from their chairs and approached the main screen. One of the men informed the others about the frenzy of rumors on the internet regarding the secret gold mine. Everyone looked at Lu Sheng's post indicating the exact location of the secret gold mine, which was valued in hundreds of billions. The man in charge of tracking the signal of 9 rings clenched his fist tightly and couldn't believe that Lu Sheng had published the location of the mine. He thought that so many people had died in vain for this secret gold mine. At that moment, someone clenched their fist and forcefully hit the armrest of their chair. They explained to others that this was truly unexpected as it was a very clever move. This man had long hair, wore a red suit, and was the leader of the rings. While staring at the ground with an indignant look, he told the others that now that everyone knew it, the man he was chasing no longer had any value. He stood up from his chair and while staring at the others, he got angry and started shouting. He thought that anyone who dared to mock the ring of the new circles should be punished. He ordered Cha to thoroughly investigate and find the traitor. At the same time, the man who was in the hotel with Lu Sheng took out his mobile phone and opened Lu Sheng's publication to read comments. Then he stared at Lu Sheng, who was distracted looking at his phone. The man wondered if Lu Sheng didn't know about the value of gold mine or why he didn't care about it in least bit. Lu Sheng turned towards him and while looking into his eyes, smiled and asked him that after he moved to another place with his daughter after checking out tomorrow, the storm caused by the gold mine would disappear. He also wished them both good luck. At that moment, the girl came out of the room and while looking at Lu Sheng with a sad look, she placed both hands behind her back. She addressed him as an older brother and asked if they would see each other again in the future. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng approached her, crouched down on the floor and while stroking her head, looked into her eyes and with a smile replied yes. The next day, members of the Circles Association arrived at the location where the blonde woman's body was found. The man with short hair, who had one hand in his pocket, asked his companion if the 9 Circles Association was so weak, since she had been grabbed by the neck and beaten to death live. The other man, crouched near the blonde woman's corpse, replied that judging by her condition, the killer must be very powerful, as there had been no resistance from her whatsoever due to the killer being too strong. Both stood up and while staring at the woman's body intently, one of them explained to his companion that this excavation was deep and seemed like it had been done with a jackhammer. He also added that no one would have thought it was done using someone's living head, let alone a level 7 master's head. He thought this was too aggressive and too violent. The man with long hair turned towards his companion and while looking him straight in the eyes, started sweating and asked if they should continue investigating. Upon hearing this, the short-haired man became furious and while pointing at the blonde woman's corpse, he explained that they could no longer investigate anything since even a mutant warrior strengthened by the organization had died in such a tragic way. He also added that furthermore, the location of the gold mine had been leaked, which meant that this mission was dangerous and had no benefits. At the same time, Lu Sheng entered the system space and as several system windows floated around him, he thought about Dark Star, the Black Ring, and the Black Magic Society. He crossed his arms and while staring fixedly at the system windows, He never expected there to be so many mysterious international organizations. Some even had traces of activity dating back 10,000 years in the world of martial arts. He didn't take long to come to the conclusion that there was a martial arts saint leading these organizations. He put his hand on his chin, and while staring at the system windows, he thought that a martial arts saint was not something that could be easily created. He concluded that there was a shadow of the state apparatus behind them. The Black Ring organization had always been dedicated to researching mutant warriors and had caused several sensational international events, becoming the target of joint attacks from various countries. He began to wonder what mutant warriors were. Then he remembered that the associations used genes from mutant beasts, implanting them into warriors, resulting in warriors with much greater strength than their peers at the same level, sometimes even several times or tens of times stronger. But everything had its pros and cons, since after accepting the gene transplant from mutant beasts, both the mind and body were corroded and transformed, like a time bomb that could explode at any moment. While he had his hand under his chin, he looked to the side and thought it was no wonder that hitting the blonde woman yesterday felt strange. He thought that the Black Ring had already started using this technology. Thinking about the Black Ring, Liu Sheng began to wonder if it was related to the previous incident of the mutant beast invasion. Because he had also seen them, he thought that the high-ranking officials of the Dragon Kingdom were not fools. So he came to the conclusion that they must have corresponding measures to deal with this. Therefore, he decided not to get involved in this anymore. He thought that if he came across something like this, he would help fix it along the way since, after all, it was easy to crush. He also thought that although the path of mutant warriors was a bit deviated, it also had its own merits. So he decided to try it if the opportunity arose in the future. Later, Liu Sheng looked at the future of the father and daughter, and upon looking at it, he thought it was promising. The girl was Gu Liu Yan, and in the future she would become the chief general of the International Criminal Investigation Department. She was a great level 8 master dedicated to pursuing organizations like Black Ring and Dark Star. She had taken down and sent to prison by her own hands over 800 terrorists in total. While he was looking at the girl's future, he became somewhat confused as he couldn't believe that by chance he had saved an international elite. He also saw that she was single and in love with the supreme warrior of the Dragon Kingdom, Liu Sheng, who had never been married in his entire life. As he was reading her information on the system windows, he placed his hands on his waist and became somewhat confused. Then, he closed his eyes, put one hand on his face, quickly closed the system windows with the other hand, and thought that this was so despicable since he shouldn't have seen this information which was damaging his inner peace. He decided not to look at this type of information in the future. While he was closing the system windows with his finger, he closed his eyes, sighed, and thought that for now it was enough. Then he started to smile and thought that he should take care of that wretched person immediately. The next day, Liu Sheng headed to the west area, more precisely to Pingzheng Street in the residential complex for workers in Feng City. He arrived at an apartment and began knocking on the door, thinking that this was where Fu Jianming lived, the man who had been murdered along with his family during the night. Several seconds later, a woman opened the door and while staring into his eyes asked him who he was looking for. Liu Sheng closed his eyes and with a pleasant smile explained to the woman that he was looking for Fu Jianming. Upon hearing this name, the woman closed her eyes, grabbed the doorknob and began to close it. She replied that she didn't know anyone named Fu Jianming and that he wasn't in this place either. Just before the woman could close the door, Liu Sheng stuck his foot in, causing panic for the woman. While looking into his eyes, she asked him what he wanted. Liu Sheng approached the door and while staring into her eyes, pointed inside the house. He explained to her that the address was not wrong and also asked her to reconsider because Fu Jianming used to live in this house. Upon hearing this, the woman became furious. With an angry look in her eyes, she responded that Fu Jianming didn't live here anymore and now this house belonged to her. She also threatened Liu Sheng by saying that if he didn't leave, she would call the police. Liu Sheng placed his hand on the door and with a serious expression began to look into the woman's eyes, revealing that he was not interested in her house as he only wanted to know where Fu Jianming was. Upon seeing Liu Sheng's expression, the woman clenched her teeth tightly and became somewhat nervous. She placed a hand on her chest and pointed outside while looking him in the eyes. She started trembling and explained that Fu Jianming was in the community dumpster. She also added that he was an old lunatic who had gone crazy when his entire family died. Liu Sheng simply remained silent, staring into her eyes. Seeing this, the woman became even more nervous and explained that she hadn't stolen the old man's house. Upon hearing this, Liu Sheng put his hands in his pockets and while he was walking away from the woman's apartment, He thanked her. The woman started looking at Lu Sheng with eyes of surprise and thought that this old lunatic really had people who came specifically to look for him. Despite being a very strange person, she also felt relieved since Lu Sheng hadn't asked her to search the house. He left the building, put his hands in his pants pockets, and began walking towards where the old man was. Several seconds later, he reached the community dumpster and saw an older man wearing a cap, a brown jacket, and worn-out clothes who was rummaging through the trash. At first, he remained silent and started observing him. Several seconds later, he took a photo, and while staring at it intently, he realized that this person was indeed the one he had been looking for. Lu Sheng caught the attention of the man and approached him as Fu Jianming, while holding up the lid of the trash can with one hand and going through its contents with the other hand. Fu Jianming turned towards Lu Sheng upon hearing his name. Due to not having a home and always rummaging through trash, he had dirty hair, worn out and smelly clothes, and flies were buzzing around him. Fu Jianming turned towards him and while staring aggressively into his eyes, asked who he was and what he wanted from him. According to the photo that Lu Sheng had in his hand, he was a clean person who always wore elegant suits, completely opposite to how he looked now. Fu Jianming, a native of Feng City, had two daughters. The youngest daughter, Fu Zhu, caught the attention of Lion Jaibai's son and was kidnapped. After finding out, the eldest daughter, Fu Ying, went to Jidao's martial arts branch to seek information and never returned. A week later, the bodies of the two sisters were found in a river outside the city, and according to reports, their causes of death had been extremely tragic. That wasn't all, because that same year, Fu Jianming's wife couldn't bear the loss of their two daughters and committed suicide using some pills. Now the only one left alive from that family was the 46-year-old white-haired elder. Fu Jianming approached his bag of belongings and grabbed it tightly with both hands. He stared into Lu Sheng's eyes and asked if he was trying to steal his things. Seeing that he had become defensive, Lu Sheng looked him in the eyes and with a pleasant smile explained that he was a colleague of Fu Ying, who had come specifically in person to see her father. Upon hearing his daughter's name, Fu Jianming was speechless and quickly approached Lu Sheng, asking if he really was a colleague of his youngest daughter Ying. Upon seeing the expression on the old man's face, Lu Sheng looked him in the eyes and with a smile, replied affirmatively and also added that he had come here to help him. Jianming became aggressive as he thought Lu Sheng was lying. He stared into his eyes and explained that he had searched for all of little Ying's companions from childhood to adulthood. He also added that he clearly remembered each one of them, and Lu Sheng was none of them. He grabbed him by the collar forcefully and asked if he was lying to try to steal something. With a sad expression, Lu Sheng simply continued looking at the old man, allowing him to vent. Jianming approached him and while staring at his face, he explained that he clearly remembered all the faces of his little daughter Ying's friends. Then he started laughing and explained that he couldn't fool him because all her friends had told him that they hadn't seen Ying. Upon remembering his daughter, Jianming began to lose composure as he couldn't believe that none of his friends had seen her. Lu Sheng placed a hand on his shoulder and apologized for lying to him. Upon hearing this, Jianming looked into his eyes and was surprised yet felt a sense of peace inside. Lu Sheng looked into his eyes and with a pleasant smile, he explained that he had actually come here to help him. Upon hearing this, Jianming couldn't believe that someone had come to help a person like him. His furious expression drastically changed to surprise. He looked into Lu Sheng's eyes and asked what he was doing here. Then he started touching his body with his hands and while looking into his eyes, smiled and asked if he was a powerful martial artist. Lu Sheng simply smiled and replied yes. Upon hearing this, Jianming raised his hands in the air and started jumping for joy as he couldn't believe that a powerful martial artist had come to help him. He moved several meters away, crouched down, and while searching for something valuable in his belongings bag, he explained to Lu Sheng that he had seen so many martial artists that now he could recognize them with just one look. He asked him to wait a moment. Lu Sheng simply smiled upon seeing the old man happy and didn't say a word. Several seconds later, Jianming pulled out a bag full of plastic bottles and empty cans. With a smile, he asked Lu Sheng for help in killing Lion Yi and Lion Jaibai, the killers of his daughters. He brought the bag close to Lu Sheng's face, and while flies were flying around the bag, he promised him that if he helped him, he would give him all his money and treasure in return. Instead of accepting the bag of plastic bottles and cans, Lu Sheng simply smiled and said nothing. Seeing that Lu Sheng was unwilling to accept his treasure, Jianming threw everything on the ground since all he wanted in this life was to avenge the death of his daughters. He looked at him in the eyes with a lost gaze and asked why he wasn't willing to accept his treasure. He also added that if it wasn't enough, he could get more. He explained that all plastic bottles and cans could be exchanged for money. Lu Sheng simply stayed silent and didn't say a word. Seeing this, Jianming panicked and asked him for help. When he saw that the money wasn't enough, he promised to give his own life in exchange for his assistance. Seeing this, Lu Sheng remained silent and with a sad look, thought that he was truly willing to give his own life to avenge the death of his daughters. Upon seeing that Lu Sheng was silent, Jianming fell to his knees and while staring at the ground with a sad expression, he asked him to forget all of this since he knew he was not going to help him. While looking at the ground, he asked if Lu Sheng had come here only to mock him, and also if the Jidao Martial Academy had sent him to check if he was dead. With tears in his eyes, he clenched his teeth tightly and while staring into Lu Sheng's eyes, he promised that he would not die as he would live forever until the Lion family died. He didn't want to leave this world until he saw with his own eyes how each of his daughter's killers went to hell. Among the remains of cans and plastic and glass bottles, Lu Sheng found a photo. As he approached it, he saw that it was a picture of Fu Jianming and his family. After seeing the photo, he turned around and while holding the photo in his hand, he started walking away from him and promised that soon he would see the killers burn in hell. Upon hearing this, Jianming couldn't help but cry and feel happy at the same time. While looking at the ground with a joyful expression, he thanked him from the bottom of his heart, despite not knowing if it was a lie. Lu Sheng put the photo in his pocket and started to move away from the community dumpster. Several seconds later, a chubby man with orange hair who was standing on a corner smoking a cigarette caught his attention. He explained to Lu Sheng that it had been a long time since he had seen someone come to look for that old lunatic. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng slightly turned his head towards him. While his hands were in his pockets, he stopped walking and while staring into the man's eyes, he asked if there had been many people who had come to visit the old man in the past. The man explained that many people had come, but they had all come here to steal his money. He also added that Jianming had been desperately looking for people willing to help him avenge the death of his family. He also explained that Jianming would give money to anyone with some martial arts skills, but no one was willing to help him because they were up against the Jidao Academy. The man stared into Lu Sheng's eyes and as he put the cigarette in his mouth, he explained at the end that all of Jianming's belongings were lost, leading him to become crazy. Then his house was robbed, and now he could only live in a dumpster. At first, he had thought that Lu Sheng had come to steal money from him like the others, but upon seeing that he was a good person, he had decided to come and talk with him. He asked Lu Sheng what purpose he had in looking for the old man. Seeing that he seemed quite capable and strong, he also asked if he wanted to get involved in someone else's affairs. Lu Sheng looked into his eyes and with a smile replied that it was true. He also revealed that he planned to go to the Jidao Martial Academy to annihilate them all. After saying these words, Lu Sheng turned around and began walking in the opposite direction of the man. The man, upon hearing his words, was surprised and while sweating, started wondering who he was. At the same time in the building of the 7th Shanggu Academy, a man wearing a purple robe picked up his teacup and revealed to his companion that Lu Sheng had not gone to Ming City. A man with purple hair wearing stylish glasses and an elegant suit took the teacup in his hand, turned towards the robed man, and explained that this time Lu Sheng had taken on 2 missions, one AA and one AAA, both around the capital. The man wearing a robe began to bring the teacup closer to his mouth, and with an ominous look, he explained to his companion that Lu Sheng had already arrived in Ming City the night before. He also added that he could have stayed there first, but instead went to Nanping. He explained to him that Lu Sheng's objective was clear since he deliberately avoided Lin Yi and the second option given by the master, which was the true test to become a disciple of the martial saint. With a smile, the man explained that seeking good fortune and avoiding evil was part of human nature. The man in the suit placed the teacup on the table, turned around, and while staring intently at the man in the robe, explained that it wasn't easy to notice. He also added that there was still some time left before the National Martial Arts Tournament. The man in the robe began drinking tea from his cup and while gazing fixedly at the ground, reminded him that only a few days had passed. He also added that the master didn't have a habit of giving second chances to people. Upon hearing this, the man in the suit fell silent. Then he looked out through the window and asked Lu Sheng not to disappoint him and their master. At the same time, at the 7th Shanggu Academy, many people approached the entrance. Everyone who had come started to stare fixedly at the large television and were left speechless. One of the men pointed towards the big television with one of his fingers, and while looking into his friend's eyes, he explained that he had heard that this time he had taken a AA level mission. He also added that this time he had returned in less than half a week. At the same time, in the guild hall, several people approached the big television which was showing a live broadcast of a martial artist carrying a sword on his back. Upon seeing the martial artist's killer aura, People thought that he had improved his strength once again. This martial artist was known as Xiao Lan, and people began to wonder how he had been able to complete a AA mission. Every time people saw him, their hearts would race. While people were talking about Xiao Lan, a man in an elegant suit entered the guild hall. With his hands in his pockets, he smiled and started staring at the large television. Ling Xing had also come to the guild hall. She approached the man, extended her hand towards him, and while looking into his eyes, she explained that Xiao Lan had returned. She also added that he seemed to have returned for the National University Martial Arts Tournament. She mentioned that a wild person like him would definitely not miss an event that took place every 2 years. While she was explaining this to him, the man stared fixedly at the large television. Then, he sighed, closed his eyes, extended his hand to the side, and explained to her that it didn't matter if Xiao Lan had come back because with a demon like Lu Sheng around, everyone else would just perish weakly. She simply looked him in the eyes and stayed silently listening without saying a word. He started staring at her intently in the eyes and explained to her that this time, with the help of Lu Sheng, the 7th Shanggu Academy would not stay in last place. She extended her hands to the sides, closed her eyes, shook her head, and revealed to him that Lu Sheng was not going to participate. Upon hearing this, the man was shocked, and while still looking into her eyes, he asked for the reason why Lu Sheng wasn't going to attend. He also added that after so much time, the 7th Shanggu Academy had finally produced a genius that only comes along once every 100 years. He also asked her why the higher-ups wouldn't let Lu Sheng participate. Ling Xing turned her head to the side and while pointing her finger towards the sky, she explained to him that she had heard from her father that the test given to Lu Sheng by the martial saint was that he couldn't participate in the National University Martial Arts Tournament. She also revealed to him that if Lu Sheng were to participate, then his test would fail, and for this reason he could only focus on challenging the SSS level mission. Upon hearing Ling Xing's words, the man was shocked and began to wonder what was happening. He started to lose his composure, approached her, and asked her what this meant. He also asked her if there was no need to suppress Lu Sheng's talent. Seeing him getting angry, she looked into his eyes and asked how they were going to be able to understand the thoughts of the martial saint. She also added that there must be a deeper explanation for this. To vent a little, he approached the wall and gave it a strong punch. Then he closed his eyes, clenched his teeth tightly, and thought it was a pity that Lu Sheng couldn't participate in the grand tournament. Upon seeing this, she became quite confused, so he explained to her that 2 years ago, the Star Twins of Jidao had destroyed the 7th Shanggu Academy, annihilating the 7 Saints. He also added that he had heard rumors about how the Kyoyu Martial Academy had also produced a saint potential that everyone was talking about in the city. He closed his eyes, clenched his teeth tightly, and while touching his neck, he explained to her that originally he had thought they could rely on Lu Sheng to fight. But now seeing that he wasn't going to participate, he explained to her that now that they were about to graduate, they would be humiliated again. She approached him and while looking into his eyes with a loving gaze, she placed one hand on his neck and the other on his face, and with a smile, she asked him not to worry because everything was fine. Ling Xing closed her eyes, and with a smile, she asked him not to worry because someone like him was already used to being humiliated. Her words pierced through his body like an arrow, leaving him quite confused by her behavior. At the same time, Lu Sheng put his hands in his pockets and started walking towards the academy dormitories. While he was walking, his mobile phone started ringing. He quickly took out the mobile phone from his pocket and after unlocking it, he saw that he had a new message. According to the content of the message, in 3 days, at 8 in the morning, the students were supposed to gather at the school gate for the National University Martial Arts Tournament. If the students arrived late, it would be considered voluntary resignation. After reading the message, he didn't take long to realize that this message had been intentionally written for him. At that moment, he began staring at the mobile phone screen and remembered that ever since he had returned, they had appeared. He began to walk quickly towards the school dormitories and thought that they had been sent to the school. He started staring at the building of San Marshall's 7th University, and upon using his power he was able to see 5 individuals with black glasses inside the building. He quickly came to the conclusion that instead of surveillance, it was as if they were waiting for him to come out. While he was staring at the building of San Marshall's 7th University, he thought that they didn't want him to leave. Then he smiled and thought that the path he, Lu Sheng, wanted to take could not be controlled by others, so the 7 Saints couldn't control him. He imagined the building of the 7th Shanggu Academy and thought that even the martial saint couldn't control him. 3 days later, at the school gate, students began to approach the buses. Vice Principal Zhao also came. He placed both hands behind his back and while he was looking around for Lu Sheng, One of the students who was carrying a backpack explained to his classmate that the Demon King would also fight in the tournament. He also added that this time, in this National University Martial Arts Tournament, they, the Shengwu 7th Academy, would defeat everyone and make them pay for previous humiliations. The student wearing a pink shirt looked him in the eyes and with a smile replied yes. Several minutes later, they all grabbed their backpacks and started heading towards the buses. One of the students explained to his classmate that he couldn't wait to see how Lu Sheng would destroy those martial arts academies. The other student started touching his head and asked his classmate where Lu Sheng had gone and why he hadn't arrived yet. One of the students with purple hair, who was wearing a fancy suit, simply put one hand in his pocket while carrying a backpack with belongings in the other. He remained silent and didn't say a word. He realized that these students didn't even know that Lu Sheng wasn't going to come. He thought that compared to the martial arts tournament, the inheritance of the martial saint was definitely more important. He also thought that even an idiot would know which one to choose. If he had been Lu Sheng, he wouldn't have participated either. He slightly turned his head to one side, and upon seeing Deputy Director Zhao looking at the clock, he began to wonder if he also thought the same way. While Zhao was looking at the clock, he realized it was already 8 o'clock, and upon seeing this, he came to the conclusion that Lu Sheng wasn't going to come. He looked up, and upon seeing what was happening, he was speechless. At that moment, Lu Sheng appeared flying and slowly started descending towards the ground. Both the students and Zhao looked up at the sky, and upon seeing Lu Sheng, they were left speechless and began wondering what was happening. In the blink of an eye, while his body was emitting a powerful aura, he landed on the ground, and quickly the students in the area moved away. While Zhao was staring at him with his mouth open, the students became happy as they realized that Lu Sheng had returned. Upon hearing this, Zhao was shocked, and while staring into his eyes, he began to wonder what was happening. The students approached the area, and upon seeing Lu Sheng, they started cheering for him. He simply put one hand in his pocket and slowly approached Zhao. He looked into his eyes and apologized to him for being late. Zhao quickly approached him and while looking into his eyes, asked him to think carefully since the martial arts tournament had just begun. He also added that there was still some time left. Lu Sheng looked into his eyes and addressed Zhao as deputy director, explaining that he was an idealist, just as he had told him before. Upon hearing this, Zhao began to look down at the ground and decided not to speak further on the matter. The students started cheering for Lu Sheng as they thought that now they would finally be able to hold their heads up high with pride. Zhao put his hands behind his back, and as he was walking towards the bus, he ordered the students to get on the bus. All the students got on the bus, and several hours later, one of the instructors took out some uniforms and explained that because they were all top students from Shengwu 7th Academy, they had to wear the same uniform. While Lu Sheng was sitting in his seat, he put a hand in his pocket, slightly turned his head to one side, and while he was looking outside through the window, the instructor noticed that there were students participating for the first time. So he decided to give them a brief introduction about the rules of martial arts tournament. Lu Sheng approached the bus window, and while looking at his reflection with a lost gaze, he thought that the vitality of a 7th level grandmaster was like a furnace. His martial arts will had been formed, and he had the posture of a grandmaster. Thinking about this, he began to wonder what an 8th level grandmaster would be like. According to the system records, after reaching the 8th level, energy and vitality would condense in the core, and its value would easily surpass 100,000. Being as strong as a wave, and as hot as lava, melting even steel, with just one strike, his combat power would reach millions. He thought that there was a significant transformation from a great master to a superior great master. Lu Sheng was only one step away from condensing his vitality into a core, and he could also enter that state at any time. However, after a great master condensed their vitality into a core, their physique would continue to become stronger as the energy core was constantly purified day and night. Therefore, the longer they stayed in the realm of the great master, the stronger their physique would be. Even their bodily functions would not deteriorate and always maintain their best form, which was equivalent to going through the 3rd rejuvenation spring and having the opportunity to face the 9th level of martial saint. He began to touch his chest with his hand and wondered when he would be able to possess the will of a great master. He started to stare ahead and thought that the power exerted by the physique of a great master, combined with the will of martial arts, was not as simple as adding 1 + 1. He decided that if he had the opportunity, then he should experience it personally. Several hours later, they arrived at Jian Mountain. Zhao looked at the students and with a smile asked them to get ready to leave. All the students got off the bus, and several people who were walking in the area saw them and realized that they were from the 7th Shengwu Academy. They thought that they had come to the national tournament that was held every year on Mountain Jian. All the students started putting on their black uniforms. Several people approached them, and one of the men asked his friend if they would be able to watch the tournament live. The woman crossed her arms and asked him to stop dreaming because to watch the tournament they had to climb to the top of the mountain. She also added that ordinary people could only watch it through a broadcast. Several minutes later, Zhao gathered all the students and explained to them that they now had to climb the mountain. He also asked everyone to listen carefully and watch his steps. Upon hearing this, all the students became excited, clenched their fists, and while looking into Zhao's eyes, responded with a yes. At that moment, one of the students gained momentum and started moving quickly towards the top of the mountain. Seeing this, Zhao quickly turned around and was astonished by the speed at which the student was advancing. He began to wonder who it was. This student was none other than Lu Sheng. While his body was emitting a powerful blue aura, he began to run quickly towards the top of the mountain, thinking that if a conflict with a martial saint was inevitable, then he should prepare himself soon. Although he hadn't even reached the level of Grand Master, as long as the martial saint didn't personally attack him, other trash wouldn't be able to kill him instantly. With a smile, he thought that he could use them to continue improving and becoming stronger. In the end, he planned to use the head of the martial saint as a simple ball to kick. Several minutes later, while everyone was climbing up the mountain through the stairs, Zhao gained momentum and started moving forward first, leaving behind all the students who couldn't keep up with his speed. After a few minutes, once they climbed quite a bit, Zhao placed one leg on the next step, leaned one of his arms on his knee, slightly turned his head towards the students and ordered them to stop as he was going to make a list. Zhao turned towards them and began counting the students using his fingers. Once he finished counting everyone, he realized that Lu Sheng was not there. He asked the students if Lu Sheng had stayed behind. One of the students who was climbing up the stairs looked into Zhao's eyes and explained to him that Lu Sheng had already gone ahead of them a while ago. He also asked if Zhao hadn't seen how he had climbed up the mountain. Upon hearing this, he was surprised. Then everyone looked ahead and saw that they still had thousands of steps left to climb. Without seeing any trace of Lu Sheng, Zhao was astonished because he couldn't believe that he had climbed such a high mountain so quickly. At the same time, at the same altitude as the clouds, several hundred steps higher than Zhao and the others, where two brothers were climbing the stairs. The man with orange hair put a hand on his waist, turned to his sister named Xiaoyun and told her that they were going to take a break here to rest a bit before continuing to climb. Xiaoyun looked into her brother's eyes with confusion and explained that she still had energy. She also asked why they didn't just climb all the steps at once. He slightly turned his head towards her and while looking into her eyes, he explained that since it was her first time in Wusheng Mountain, there were some rules she didn't understand. So he decided to take this opportunity to explain them to her. Upon hearing this, Xiaoyun slightly turned her head towards him, looked into his eyes, and asked him which rules he was referring to. He explained to her that they had already reached the cloud level, and beyond it were 5 stone steps, which were currently covered by clouds. Both of them looked towards the top of Wusheng Mountain, and he explained to her that these 5 stone steps were called the path to heaven because climbing them was like ascending to heaven all at once. Just when he was about to explain to her what had happened 200 years ago, Xiaoyun interrupted him, pointed her finger towards the sky, looked into his eyes and asked him if he could get to the point since she already knew all that. She also added that now she understood why her father always told her that her older brother was a bit soft. Upon hearing this, he put one hand behind his head, closed his eyes and with a smile explained to her that he just wanted her to regain some energy. And seeing that she was complaining, he decided to get straight to the point. He explained to her that the main point was the great master Wusheng Zufuhai who had practiced here. He had refined his body with celestial fire, tempered his body with celestial thunder, and achieved divine perception, becoming a great master, so much so that the entire Wusheng Mountain still carried his aura as a great master. Any martial artist under 30 years old who came here and had enough talent and climbed the 5 stone stairs in one go without stopping would activate the opportunity that Wusheng left behind here. He extended his hands towards the sky, closed his eyes, and as the clouds were slowly disappearing and the steps were starting to shine, he explained to her that if something like this were to happen, then a rare celestial and earthly phenomenon would occur. Xiaoyun looked at her brother with confused eyes and asked him what a celestial and earthly phenomenon was. Just before he could speak, the clouds began to disappear. Quickly, both turned towards the top of the mountain and started wondering what was happening. When they looked towards the peak of the mountain, they saw that it was starting to shine and was emitting a powerful golden energy. While both were looking towards the peak, he explained to her that this was the phenomenon he had been talking about, in which clouds and fog stirred up and everything became mysterious and murky, and whoever could trigger a phenomenon like this would ascend to become a master in the future. Just before he could finish speaking, something gigantic appeared above them, leaving them speechless. In the sky, a giant whale appeared that began to emerge from the clouds and started singing. He explained to his sister that this was incredible because the long song of the white whale was the highest category phenomenon. Several seconds later, small whales also appeared next to the giant whale, and while both were staring at the sky, with a trembling voice he explained to his sister that this time they could be witnessing history. While Xiao Yun was looking at the whales, she asked her brother what this meant. He responded that on top of this mountain, there were at least 3 young people who had the potential to become future strong martial masters. Upon hearing this, she turned her head towards him, and while looking into his eyes with a surprised expression, she asked if there were really 3 martial masters at the top. He turned towards her, and while looking into her eyes, he replied that it wasn't exactly like that since they only had the power to become martial masters and he wasn't sure if they would achieve it. He looked towards the whale and explained to her that even so, it was quite impressive because seeing the hope of becoming a great master before 30 years old was an opportunity that very few people had. He also added that the others didn't even have a 1 in a million chance. Xiao Yun started running, slightly turned her head towards him, and while looking into his eyes, she asked him to stop talking, as she also wanted to give it a try since she also wanted to provoke something like the whale. At that moment, Lu Sheng passed by Xiao Yun at an abyssal speed, making neither of them able to feel his presence. He was climbing the stairs at an incredible speed, and every time he stepped on a new step, his body emitted an incredible blue energy. Along the way, he left behind a trail of energy. Xiao Yun turned to Lu Sheng, and while looking at the trail of energy with eyes full of surprise, she was left speechless and asked her brother who that person was and if they were human. At that moment, a giant golden dragon began to emerge from the mountain and started moving towards the top. Upon seeing this, the man began to tremble, and while staring fixedly at the golden dragon and white whales, he explained to his sister that this dragon was the rise of the sacred dragon, which was capable of devouring everything. Now that he was seeing this with his own eyes, he thought that the legend was real. In the blink of an eye, the sacred dragon caught up to Lu Sheng, and while flying by his side, it started staring into his eyes. As he was climbing the stairs, he turned his head towards the sacred dragon and began to wonder what was happening. At first, he only wanted to climb the mountain his way, but as he ascended, he felt a strange sensation slowly emerging from his heart. This sensation was as if in this world, only he remained, separated from the sky and the earth. At that moment, he looked around and saw that his body was emitting all kinds of energies. Seeing this, he began to wonder how the natural breathing method had activated naturally. He hadn't done anything special since he had simply climbed in a simpler and more direct way. But all of his techniques seemed to be guided by someone or something pulling him up and propelling him forward. When he looked to the side, he saw how the sacred dragon had grabbed the white whales with its hands and was slowly starting to devour them. He became quite confused and began to wonder what was happening. He thought that at first there were 3 whales and now a dragon. He didn't know if this was some kind of welcoming ceremony. The sacred dragon stopped in front of him, and upon seeing this, he also stopped, and while staring into its eyes, he began to wonder what was happening. The sacred dragon began to roar towards Lu Sheng's body, leaving him surprised. He quickly realized that the roar was resonating with his martial will and came to the conclusion that the dragon possessed a powerful energy. Several minutes later, he reached the peak while his body was surrounded by the sacred dragon, leaving the other students dumbfounded. One of the men put his hand on his forehead and while looking at Lu Sheng, began to wonder who the hell this man was and how he had managed to provoke the phenomenon of the sacred dragon. The twins from Extreme Path had caused the whale's unified song, and Saint Maio from Beyond Wulin Academy, upon seeing Lu Sheng, all realized that they were far below him. Everyone began to wonder where a monster like this had come from. Lu Sheng descended to the ground, and while he was walking, the sacred dragon started flying around him. One of the students told the others that the waves were piling up, the sacred dragon was ascending, and everything was submitting. An old man with long hair and a beard slightly turned his head towards Lu Sheng, and while looking into his eyes, he explained to the others that after so many years in the mountain of accumulated clouds, this was the first time he had seen such an imposing sight as the legends. The old man pointed his finger at Lu Sheng and ordered his students to go and find out who he was, to which one of the students saluted in martial arts style, and responded yes. As Lu Sheng walked, everyone started looking at him and whispering among themselves, wondering who he was. They thought he was a monster. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would have thought he was a martial arts saint in person. One of the students looked more closely at Lu Sheng and noticed that he was wearing the badge of the 7th Holy University of Martial Arts. He revealed to everyone that Lu Sheng was one of the 7 greats. Upon hearing this, everyone was stunned. He simply turned his head to one side, and while holding the backpack, he smiled. One of the students asked the others how the trash from the 7th saint, which had been useless for 1,000 years, had produced such a monster. Another student told the others that some of the martial arts saints who had climbed Cloud Mountain in the past only caused 1 or 2 visions of white whales when they were young. She looked at her classmate intently in the eyes and asked him how it could be that Lu Sheng, such a young person, was able to surpass the martial arts saints 100 times. A girl with blue hair caught everyone's attention and revealed to them that she knew Lu Sheng. She explained that he was a genius of the 7th generation of the Holy Martial Arts University. Upon hearing this, everyone was amazed. According to them, Lu Sheng was the man who dominated the Tower of the Martial Arts Saints from the 7 universities. He simply stayed silent while listening to the compliments and started walking while being followed by the sacred dragon. Lu Sheng stared straight ahead and called the dragon Fire Dragon. At the top of Mount Jihyun, where the clouds slowly began to dissipate, several students gathered, and one of them told the others that it didn't surprise him that Lu Sheng was so strong, since he was ultimately the most valued disciple of the martial saint. While the girl with blue hair and a student with purple hair were staring at Lu Sheng, the boy explained to the others that Lu Sheng's talent was extraordinary, as he had the potential to become a martial saint. He also added that if he continued improving his talent, he would be able to surpass even the martial saint. Upon hearing this, the other students were shocked. The boy with blue hair looked at the boy with purple hair and asked if Lu Sheng was really going to become stronger than the martial saint. The other student with blonde hair also started looking at the boy with purple hair and asked everyone what that was about. At the same time, someone holding 2 balls in their hand approached them and explained that Lu Sheng's talent for martial arts could not be calculated in this way. This gray-haired old man was the Grand Master Kai. While he held the 2 balls in his hand, he began to approach them. He stood in front of the students, closed his eyes, put one hand behind his back, and explained to them that if the temperature was 1 degree lower, water would turn into ice. If the temperature was 1 degree higher, then water would turn into vapor. He also added that sometimes the effects seemed very different, but their essence was not very different. Upon hearing this, the 4 students began to stare at him intently and were somewhat confused, as they did not know what the Grand Master Kai was talking about. While holding the 2 balls in his hand, Grand Master Kai turned his head towards Lu Sheng and revealed to them that he had a strong talent, but it wasn't as exaggerated as people really thought. Meanwhile, Lu Sheng put both hands in his pants pockets, simply continued walking, and decided not to pay much attention to the other students. Then Grand Master Kai explained to everyone that the strange phenomenon of Mount Martial Saint was not something specifically used to test one's martial arts talent. He thought that maybe it was just that Lu Sheng's martial arts fortune and Zhu Fuhai's martial saint fortune were extremely compatible, and for that reason he had caused more phenomena than others. He also added that it was even more likely that the people before him had already taken advantage of many opportunities from the fortune, and Lu Sheng happened to be in the right time and place to fully activate the remaining fortune of the martial saint mountain. He explained to them that only for this reason Lu Sheng had been able to create the shocking scene of the sacred dragon. He closed his eyes and explained to them that, according to what they were saying, this couldn't happen in any other way. He asked them if they believed there was someone stronger than the martial saint. He also added that the martial saint was the god of this world and there was no one more powerful than him. Everyone simply remained silent and didn't interrupt the great Master Kai. The boy with blue hair clenched his fist and struck it against the palm of his hand, and while looking at his companion, he explained that Grand Master Kai was right because it was impossible for there to be someone stronger than the martial saint. Upon hearing this, the boy with blonde hair pointed to the sky with his finger, and while staring into his companion's eyes, he replied that he agreed because it was just like food. It wasn't the last bite that filled you up. Grand Master Kai turned his head slightly towards the girl with blue hair, and while looking into her eyes, smiled and explained that judging by the aura Lu Sheng had just emitted, it was true that his talent and strength were superior to those of his age. The girl with blue hair looked into the Grand Master's eyes and nodded her head, and he also added that Lu Sheng was worthy of being someone highly valued by the martial saint, as he was an exceptional person with great talent. The girl with blue hair turned her head towards Lu Sheng, and while staring into his eyes, she put a hand under her chin and explained to Grandmaster Kai that now that Lu Sheng had caused a commotion, she feared that those from the Jidao Martial Academy would panic. As night fell, everyone went to the Jian Mountain Hotel, where a man forcefully slammed his fist on the table and asked others what this shit was. This man was the martial instructor from Jidao named Lion Jaibai. While he had his left hand clenched on the table, he placed his other hand on his waist, slightly turned his head towards the students of Jidao Academy, and while looking them in the eyes, he told them that people like them embarrassed him. Despite the fact that Lu Sheng had only caused a small strange phenomenon, everyone was shocked. With one finger pointing at all the students of the academy, and while repeatedly hitting the table with the other hand, he explained to them that Lu Sheng wasn't even a great master since at most he had good talent. He reminded them all that they were the main elites of Jidao Martial Academy. After saying this, he asked why they were so afraid of a student from Wusheng Academy. Everyone simply stayed silent and didn't say a word. Several seconds later, while one of the students who was twirling a strand of hair around their finger explained to the others that Instructor Lion was right. This man was one of the twin stars of Jidao named Ko Kayan. He took a step forward and while touching his shoulder with one hand, he placed the other on his waist. He began staring into the Instructor Lion's eyes and explained to everyone that Lu Sheng wasn't even a great master at this moment. He also added that even if he had great talent, it would only serve him in the future and not right now. He also revealed to them that if he used the secret skills he knew and attacked Lu Sheng with everything, then maybe he wouldn't be worse than him. Another man who was one of Jidao's twin stars named Ko King also stepped forward. While one hand was tucked into his pants pocket, with the other hand grabbing his jacket, he stared at the Instructor Lion and explained to everyone that this was true because the strength of martial arts could not be determined by flashy things. Ko Kayan simply placed his hands on his hips, turned his head towards him, started smiling, and didn't say a single word. Ko King clenched his fist tightly and, with a smug smile, explained to the others that if Lu Sheng were in front of him right now, he would beat him up. Instructor Lion approached them, clenched both fists tightly, and while staring into their eyes, explained to everyone that this was the energy that the twin stars of Jidao Martial Academy should possess. Ko King and Ko Kayan simply remained silent and did not interrupt the instructor. Then the instructor placed his hand in front of his chest, and while his body was emitting an evil energy, with an evil look he began to stare into their eyes and explained that if this was the case, then he could arrange a little game for them. He also added that the first team to find Lu Sheng in the tournament and beat him to death would win the tournament. He asked everyone not to worry about the 7 saints as he himself would help them take care of this. At the same time, in the Martial Kyoyu Academy's lounge, the girl with blue hair sat on the couch and took out her mobile phone. While she was holding the phone in one hand, she pulled up Lu Sheng's photo and couldn't help but fall in love with him and blush. As she was lost in her thoughts of love, her brother approached her. He placed a hand on his waist and while looking into her eyes, he asked if she was worried about Lu Sheng. She slightly raised her head and while looking into his eyes, she was somewhat surprised. He extended his palm and while looking into her eyes, he began to smile and asked her not to worry, as Lu Sheng's strength was unclear, but they estimated that he hadn't even reached the stage of refining his body with martial arts will. He also added that he wouldn't be a match for someone like her. He reminded her that her goal was the twin stars of the Jidao Martial Academy. He pointed his finger towards the ceiling and while his body was emitting a green energy, he looked into her eyes and explained that they had already condensed their will 2 years ago, so now they were in the stage of quasi-Grand Master. While she was holding the phone with both hands, she looked down at the floor with a lost gaze and replied that she understood. Her brother simply started looking into her eyes and became somewhat confused by her behavior. He clenched both fists tightly and asked her not to be deceived by visions. He also added that even if the visions predicted on the mountain were true, nothing was absolute. He also mentioned that although Lu Sheng had a lot of talent, there was a possibility that he would not be able to compare himself to her, and it was even difficult to say that he was stronger than her. She simply started looking at the photo of Lu Sheng she had on her phone and decided to ignore the nonsense her brother was telling her. While she was looking at her phone, she thought that she had possessed a special talent since she was a child. When she was a child, she could see ghosts and gods. Just now, when she saw Lu Sheng go up, she felt like she had seen a dense black mist behind him, covering the entire Wusheng mountain. She started to wonder if it could have been her hallucination. At the same time, in the hotel reception area, all the students from different academies began to talk about Lu Sheng. A student with orange hair who was talking to his classmate placed a hand on his waist, extended the other to the side, and explained that this was the power of Demon Lu Sheng. Another student who was walking beside his classmate turned towards him and with a smile said that Lu Sheng had caused an unprecedented phenomenon. Another student clenched his fist tightly and while looking into his classmate's eyes, he smiled and explained that Lu Sheng would definitely win this time. Upon hearing this, the other student also clenched his fist and replied that Lu Sheng was an incredible person. While the two of them were praising Lu Sheng, another red-haired student crossed his arms and silently watched them both intently. As he looked at the others with a confused expression, he thought to himself that fortunately, he hadn't rushed into fighting against Lu Sheng. Otherwise, the confidence in martial arts that he had cultivated for 4 years in the academy would have been destroyed in that moment. At that moment, Lu Sheng, who was wearing a hood, appeared and while looking into his eyes, explained to him that he himself was now a walking example. Upon hearing Lu Sheng's voice, the other student with crossed arms turned his head towards him and while looking into his eyes, simply remained silent. He didn't know how strong Lu Sheng's energy and willpower had to be to cause this phenomenon. He also realized that his martial arts will had already condensed. He didn't take long to come to the conclusion that if he fought against him again, it wouldn't be any different from last time. Upon hearing so much praise, Lu Sheng closed his eyes, lowered his head, and sighed. While he was distracted, someone put a hand on his shoulder and asked him not to waste himself. This person was the old director of the 4th Academy. Lu Sheng turned his head to the side and was somewhat surprised to see the director. While the old director had his hand resting on Lu Sheng's shoulder, he looked into his eyes and explained that it was better to forget about it and focus on one's own path. The old director placed a hand behind his back and explained to Lu Sheng that their 7 academies were one entity, so they didn't need to consider Lu Sheng as an opponent. The red-haired boy also approached them and explained to him that the old director was right since with Lu Sheng here, this martial arts tournament was going to be exciting. The old director began to distance himself from them, slightly turned his head to one side, and while looking into Lu Sheng's eyes, he explained that this was where they, the 7 saints, had the opportunity to obtain first place. Lu Sheng took off his hood, put both hands in his pockets, and simply remained silent listening. The old director moved further away from them, slightly turned his head towards him and thought that Lu Sheng was going to become a dragon. Zhao also arrived at the hotel reception. While he was staring at Lu Sheng, he began to wonder why he didn't understand him even though he had made it so clear. As long as Lu Sheng ended Lian Yi's life, regardless of the relationship with the Jiado Martial Academy, the Martial Saint would protect him from everything. Now that Lu Sheng had come to Mount Jihyun, Zhao thought that the Martial Saint would only observe his attitude. While Lu Sheng was lost in his thoughts, Zhao approached him from behind and while staring at him intently, he thought that in the end, he had taken the wrong path. At that moment, Lu Sheng's body began to emit a powerful golden energy. He lowered his head and while looking at his hand, he started wondering what was happening. It didn't take him long to realize that the energy that had just entered his body not only increased his strength. He stared at the ground and thought there was also an image of a giant whale. He wondered if it could be the whale that was swallowed back then. He thought that if that was the case, then he should call the whale. Without thinking twice, Lu Sheng used the power of the divine whale. He closed his eyes and the spirit of the white whale appeared in his mind. He soon realized that this was the power of martial arts Dharma. He thought that every movement could resonate with the power of heaven and earth. While Lu Sheng was distracted, he began to feel a murderous aura. He quickly turned his head back and saw Instructor Lion among the crowd. With a killer look, Lion Jaibai began to stare into Lu Sheng's eyes. While Lu Sheng was staring back at Lion Jaibai's eyes, he thought that as expected of the team leader, a grade 8th level master was emanating powerful energy. He came to the conclusion that if he were to fight against him, he would only have a maximum of 30% chance of winning. And even then he would have to do it in his martial god state minute. Once the state of the martial god came to an end, he didn't know how the battle would go. However, if Lu Sheng advanced to the level of Grand Master, condensed his energy and vitality into a core, and entered the state of martial god, then Lion Jaibai would be defeated by him in less than 10 seconds. He began to smile as he realized that many people had set their eyes on him. He put his hands in his pockets and while walking, he started staring at Lion Jaibai, and with a smile, decided to just wait calmly and let the script that he had written happen step by step. He decided that if someone didn't want to cooperate, then he would kill them with his own hands. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.